Hello, I'm just north of Applecross on a place called Sands. In the background you can see the Isle of Skye, and I think it's Isle of Raasay, and you can see why I come here, just to get a sense of somewhere bigger than myself and a sense of perspective. This video is, I think, the fourth in a series about being creative, and really I just wanted to explore my own journey towards creativity. Interestingly enough, the education system told me I was not creative at all. So I still can't draw for toffee. So in art lessons, it was just a waste of time for me, to be honest. And actually now my 6-year-old granddaughter can definitely draw better than I can still today. In needlework lessons, I failed massively. We had an exam and I remember very clearly that I got 12%. So the whole education system told me I was not creative. However, it did tell me I was really good at maths. Once I got to 6th form, I really did excel. I got really good grades in maths and statistics and went on to do a degree in statistics. And I thought, that's great. This is me. I pigeonholed myself in this sort of like creativity, not me. My sister, really arty. Me, not the arty one. She got all the arty genes. And that's how I thought of myself. And yet, I knew, on the other hand, that God was incredibly creative, you know, from the very act of creation itself, where he speaks things into being and there they are, they exist, to even today it talks about he knit you together in your mother's womb. And if you think about just how many people are giving birth and expecting around the world today, it must be millions. And each of those, it says, is knit together. He knew them at that point. And so this is a God who is loving and creating. And we're made in his image. And I knew I was made in his image, so I had this dichotomy that, here I was, this non-creative person, and yet my dad, my heavenly father, was this amazing creative father. It didn't seem to make sense. And so a light bulb moment came when there was a minister, and he was starting to talk about we are all made creative, and I was sat there going, well, not me. And you know how sometimes that is, you're listening to the chap, somebody's preaching, and you're going, yeah, no, but not me. And it wasn't, he said, and it was the most silly thing. He said, if you've ever booked a holiday and it's not been a package holiday and you've put it all together, you're creative. And suddenly I was like, wow, I'm creative, and there's a sense of like, if you've ever booked a holiday like that, or you've ever baked a cake, or you've ever made anything, we're creative. We're made to be creative. So we just need to look at the things that God's put in us. And in a sense, school had messed with my head, because it had said, you don't fit into these boxes of creativity, therefore you're not creative. And it so wasn't true. And for me, that really was a light bulb moment. And I started to explore my own creativity after that. And I guess creating doesn't, also, God created something out of nothing, didn't he? And in a sense, our creativity can be that. So for me, things that I feel I've been called to do, I've been part of a team that set up a job club in the city of Salisbury, where I live near. I've also been part of a team that set up a local expression of what's called Baby Basics in Salisbury, which provides the essentials, Moses basket and a whole load of clothing and nappy for mothers who otherwise wouldn't be able to have those for their newborns. And also I've done some writing here and there, and I definitely wouldn't say I'm a great writer. There's a secular book that talks about you need to do 10,000 hours of something, and I'm way short of that 10,000 hours. But you know what? I'm not going to wait until I'm that great, because I've got to work my way there. I've got to do 10,000 hours before I'm any good. So I'm keeping at it. So just let me give you a short story of how the job club came about. We were privileged to have in the church in which I'm part of, Jane Gould, who set up GB Job Clubs, which is now most of those job clubs have become part of CAP Job Clubs, which you might be aware of. And that's a whole network of job clubs which support job seekers right across the country, the UK. And she was a challenge to us. There was just a handful, us 3 or 4, I think, that we were challenged because we had this amazing woman who was going out and talking about job clubs here and there, and yet we didn't have one in our own city. and we were waiting and we were praying. And I remember there came a moment, we'd sort of talked about it with the church leader, and it was a now, but not yet really. And then there came a moment where suddenly it all just came together, and it was like, and so we went back to the church leader and he said yes. And I think, if I remember rightly, from that yes to when we actually got up and running was less than 3 months. We had our first one. And actually, that means you've got no time to be afraid. You've got no time. We managed to secure the funding through a grant and local grant funding from the council. So we just cracked on and we did it. And do you know what? God was in it, because the people that were in it, certainly myself, certainly weren't greatly gifted to do that, but we were called. And what was amazing was each time I knew that if God didn't show up, we were just going to fall completely flat on our faces. And so each week, it was a Monday morning, 10 o'clock, I think. And each week, Sunday night, I was like, Lord, please show up tomorrow. Because if you don't, we're going to look like right Charlies. And you know what? Every time something would happen, people would have conversations, people came and they were really encouraged. And it wasn't dozens and dozens of people. I think over the years we've had maybe 150 people come through the job club in that sort of 5-year period. And we've been able to encourage and uplift them and help them move on to the next thing. With Baby Basics, the story was somewhat different. We'd been running Job Club for a while, and in my heart I was thinking, there needs to be something more. We need to express something more of this amazing love of Christ in our city. And I was watching and waiting. And I remember it was one Friday, and I followed the Trussell Trust Facebook page, and they shared on their page about this Baby Basics, which was linked with, I think, a food bank in one of their areas, because they do a sort of celebration Friday of someone who does something amazing. And it was just like, that's it. I think that's it. This is what I've been waiting for. This has been months. I've been sort of thinking, what could it be? What could be? Nobody had asked me to. I just had this sense in my being, and I just thought, okay. And so I found out a bit more about it. I looked and saw that this was part of a Cinnamon Network project, and it was something that they were starting up. I think they were only, about that time, there were probably 5 or 6 Baby Basics right across the country. Now there's dozens, but we were, I think, sort of the 8th or the 9th. And again, we set that up really not knowing what we were doing. There were a lot of great guidelines from the Central Baby Basics guys, and we are now giving out probably 2 or 3 baskets a month. And there's probably sort of 5 or 6 volunteers that are running that. And we believe that, this is giving babies a good start. It's saying we value you. It's honouring mums, who are going through a difficult time. It's providing some basic needs. And we believe that that's God's calling. I believe that's God's calling for us as Christians, is to make a difference. And it doesn't matter if it's the one. The one is so, so important to God. I remember that story. There's a story, you've probably heard it before, about the starfish. And there's this beach, and they're strewn with these stranded starfish. And this child, the parents watching as this child goes along and picks one up and puts it back in. And the parents like, well, how is this going to make a difference? And the child goes, but it makes a difference to this one, as he puts it back in the water. And that's what we're called to do. I think, some people are called to make a difference to thousands, but many of us are called to make a difference to just a small number of people. And yet we can do that faithfully. It's that same thing about being faithful in the small things. In terms of writing, my first book actually was a series of letters that I'd written. I was writing to a chap called Brian in America, and he was going through a really discouraging time. And so I wrote him a series of letters, which were basically sharing moments from my own difficult times when God had showed up. And it was just really very simple things. And what I did later on, when I sort of was further on in this journey of creativity, I saw that one could self-publish a book, and I thought, you know what? If that can help one person, lift one person out of feeling low and down and just enable them to look to God, then it's worth doing. So I put these letters that I wrote to him, I sort of developed them a little and put them together in my first book, which was called Daily Readings for Difficult Days. And since then, I've gone on as and part of it is I've been exploring stuff myself. So one of the things I wanted to explore for myself was like, what does it mean to be a Christian woman? And I didn't find that even I've been in numbers of churches, different denominations. I've been in a Baptist, I've been in a Methodist, I've been in New Frontiers, Charismatic Pentecostal, and yet very few times have I actually heard people preach about what it means to be a woman of God or talk about the women of God that are in the Bible. So I did my own. I thought I'm going to go through and find out for myself. And what I did is I found out was I really wanted to dig in and get some real nuggets out. And what helped me actually was to write notes. And as I did that, I was that became another book, which is called Women of Courage, which is stories of the 31 women. And it was marvellous discovering how very different and vibrant these women were. But there was no box they were in. They were all so, honestly, different as chalk and cheese. And yet God used each single one of them. And I found that, again, so encouraging for me what I hadn't found was a resource like that. And you might think it's arrogant of me to create a resource, think that I've got an answer, and I haven't got an answer, but I'm sure somebody will come along and write way better books than I've done. No doubt about it. But actually, there wasn't, I couldn't find books written by people in the UK for people in the UK. There's lots of books written by Americans, and they're all well and good, but I didn't find it easy to relate to them because the culture, though the language is the same, the culture is very different. And so I wanted to write something by a woman from the UK for women in the UK, and that's what I did. And it, as I say, you might call it arrogant. I just thought, again, if it helps one person, it helps one person to think, do you know what? I don't have to be like this person. I can be like that person. I might be a Deborah. I might be a Ruth. I might be the woman. Well, it doesn't matter. You can still be called of God and used by God in whatever circumstance you find yourself in. So that's something of my journey to creativity. I'm very much still on it. Even this video is part of my journey to creativity. I'm not a videographer, but I'm going with, if I have a really cool background, you might forgive the rest of it and the bad sound and so on. Anyway, this has been me just north of Applecross, overlooking the Isle of Skye and Rathay in Scotland. I hope you have a great day.